Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this, the 8th edition of the Sunway Education Inclusive Leadership Series, or as we call it, SEILS. And actually, this is our 3rd edition, I believe, for 2025. Some of you were here with us earlier this month when we were truly delighted to host Professor Dame Ijeoma Uchebu, the current president of Wolfson College, who is an accomplished pharmaceutical scientist, innovator, and advocate of inclusive leadership. For this, the 8th session, and in keeping with the high pedigree of speakers that we have had in this session, and also links to Cambridge, we are indeed very pleased to host Dr. Julian Tan, who is the Group Strategy Director at BT Group PLC, also as an advisor, and of course we are celebrating the fact that we are launching his book today, so Julian is also an author. Now, Julian's session today is really special, as we will later on be privileged to witness the launch of his book entitled From Nowhere to Somewhere, and I thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I see many young people here who are probably very eager to learn about Julian's journey. Now, before we witness the launch, we will have this unique opportunity to hear from Julian himself as he shares insights into his life journey. And to serve as our tour guide to help us navigate our travels along with Julian, we are also very honored to have Mr. Danial Rahman, the CEO of the ASEAN Strategy and Leadership Institute, who has very graciously accepted the onerous task of moderating this session, and I know that Daniel's experience will certainly be of great use to moderate this session. Now, so ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming on stage our guest, Dr. Julian Tan, and our moderator, Danial Rahman.
Right. Testing the microphone. 1, 2, 3. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Thank you so much for being with us today. How's everybody doing? Let's do that one more time, a bit more energy. How's everybody doing today? Fantastic. What a wonderful crowd we have here today with me, Dr. Julian, and we are truly very excited to have him here. Now, in a moment, Dr. Julian will be starting off and sharing a little bit about his journey. It will be followed by some questions by me. And while this happens, I truly encourage all of you to start thinking of questions that you may like to ask him. And this is truly your opportunity to speak to someone who, I had the privilege of meeting Julian a few days ago in preparation for today. And I must say, I was truly inspired by him. So, a little bit of Dr. Julian Tan's background. He is the former head of Digital Business Initiative and Esports at Formula One. Any Formula One fans here? A few? Yeah? Yeah, I see some very excited hands. The Netflix series, what's it called, Julia?
Drive to Survive.
Drive to Survive, yeah, that's a pretty interesting show, where he led the organization's entry into the world of competitive gaming, transforming F1's digital presence and widening its global fan base. He is also currently the director of group strategy at BT PLC, which is based in London. And today he is not just a best-selling author, he's also a speaker, leadership coach, dedicated to unlocking human potential through inclusive leadership, purposeful innovation, and personal growth. Now, Julian is a Cambridge-trained engineer with a PhD in innovation from the University of Oxford, my alma mater, where he began his career as a management consultant at the Boston Consulting Group, advising Fortune 500 clients across Southeast Asia, with a keen interest in the intersection of technology, human behavior, and leadership. Julian's work has spanned diverse sectors, including sports, business, and social impact. He is also the author of This Is What Chase Looks Like, a #1 Amazon bestseller that explores the pursuit of dreams with courage, compassion, and intentionality. Outside of work, he openly shares his journey of mental health recovery and resilience, advocating for kindness, vulnerability, and the importance of rethinking success in an increasingly fast-paced world. A proud Malaysian, a Subang boy. Anyone here from Subang? You can hear go, ooh, Subang. Can lah. A proud Malaysian, Julian serves as an inspiration to emerging leaders across the globe, showing that boldness, empathy, and authenticity can coexist in this modern leadership journey. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over the floor, Dr. Julian. Please, the floor is yours. Round of applause.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to say a really genuine, heartfelt thank you for all of you making time to be here with us today. On a Friday afternoon, we tend to call it the graveyard slot. So I'm really appreciative that you took out time of your day to be with us. So Dan and I, we caught up a couple of days ago, and over coffee, he was like, you know, Julian, it would be really good if you could pull together a few photos to kind of give people an idea on who you are. And I actually found this task quite difficult because I think there's only so much you can tell in photos. But anyways, I cobbled together a few photos and I pulled together a bit of a slideshow to take you through you know, who I am as a person, both professionally and personally. So I thought it would be helpful to start from the very beginning. I was born and I grew up in Subang Jaya, in USJ5 specifically. And as a kid, I was always a very curious kid. I was a kid who loved learning, so I was a model student in school, not because of any other reason than the fact that I just was I was always very intrigued by how things worked. And as a kid, you know, I had very big dreams. From a very young age, I knew that I wanted to get into a top university. I knew I wanted to get into an Ivy League university at Oxbridge because I saw education as the golden ticket almost to transform my life. And so that's me in red. That was me when I was younger. I was a pudgy little kid. And as a kid, you know, someone who was a little bit pudgier, loved learning, did very well in school, naturally meant that I wasn't the most popular kid in school. And like many kids who grow up in Malaysia and around the world, I got picked on at school. And, you know, in many ways, you know, I've also included a photo of Bill Nye the Science Guy. I don't know how many in this room know this program, but it's a science program. And it was my favorite TV show growing up. So you can only imagine, right? You've got this little heavier boy. I eventually got glasses as well, and loved watching science programs. I was the prime target for any bully in school. So I didn't have the best experience growing up in school, but I always knew that education was very important. It was probably the most important thing to me. And, you know, getting into Oxford it changed my life. You know, I oftentimes describe my life as a life of two chapters. I've got a chapter pre-Oxbridge and a chapter post-Oxbridge. And my life pre-Oxbridge was one that was sleepy, you know, there was a lot of hope in there, but it was pretty uneventful. And when I got into Oxford and then eventually into Cambridge as well, opportunities just opened up. Like, you know, it flowed towards me effortlessly. And this is my actual offer letter on the left here. This is when I received my offer to get into Oxford. And I still remember the feeling of receiving this letter. It was, I think it was a Thursday or Friday evening. And just the pure elation of getting into Oxford, because it was the culmination of years of preparation that culminated into that moment. And yeah, it was just pure bliss. And I loved my time at Oxford. This is me on my final, on the far right at the top, is me on the final day of exams. In Oxford, we've got this tradition, which I write in my book as well, that's called trashing. So at the end of your exams, your friends would trash you. So in this case, my friends had bucket loads of water, and they threw it on me. And I love this photo because it's a photo of just pure liberation, and it captures the moment so perfectly. And I still remember that feeling after working so hard throughout the 4 years I was at Oxford. So that's me, and then that's me with my family on graduation day. And I did very well at Oxford. I applied a lot of the learnings that I did growing up to get me into Oxford, in Oxford, which then meant that I graduated with a first-class degree at Oxford and also graduated within the top 5 percentile of my year, which gave me the opportunity to do a PhD that was funded by Cambridge. And I joined Cambridge University, and that meant that I became one of only a handful of Malaysians to have done what we call the Oxbridge Double, where you go to Oxford and to Cambridge. And when I was doing my PhD at Cambridge, it was fully funded by the university, but I was working with Boeing and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries on their 787 Dreamliner. So the top left there, the 787 Dreamliner was the world's first all-composite aircraft. So this was an aircraft that was made purely from composite material. So there's no aluminum, there was no steel. And I worked on the wing material specifically. And oftentimes joke that if you ever fly a 787 Dreamliner, and if you see the wings flex a little bit, don't be alarmed, it's meant to do that. And my research when I was at Oxford confirmed that. But when I was, in Cambridge, but when I was in Cambridge doing my PhD, I had 2 parts to my PhD. So I had an experimental part where I would essentially go into the lab day after day breaking carbon fiber laminates, because my research was in identifying how this particular material would perform under different loads of stress, whether it's tensile, compressive, shear stress. And these are actual images of my research. From the experiments, I then built a model to predict the behavior of this material, which is used by Boeing and Mitsubishi as well. But it's actually through this research that I managed to publish my work in some prestigious journals as well. So on the bottom left here, the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, Part A. This academic journal is by the Royal Society of London. It's the first of 2 of their major journals. And I managed to publish my research in this prestigious journal. And it was, the pinnacle of my academic career, because past authors of this academic journal include Sir Isaac Newton and Stephen Hawking. And Sir Isaac Newton actually introduced his theory of the 7 colors of the rainbow that we all know and love through this publication. And Stephen Hawking introduced the concept of the cosmological constant as well through this journal. Similarly, I loved my time at Cambridge. It was a time of, being a very curious kid and doing a PhD is a match made in heaven. And this is me in front of the red door on the day that I submitted my thesis. We've got a tradition in Cambridge where once you have completed your thesis, you would submit it through these red doors. I don't think it's red anymore, but that was the context of this photo. And then that's me on graduation day at Cambridge. So following Oxford and Cambridge, like I said, it opened up the world to me. It really, opportunities just started to flow in. And studying at Oxbridge opened up the doors and allowed me to move to London, where I could build my executive career. So I started my professional career at a company called Boston Consulting Group, BCG. They are a strategy consulting company, a management consulting company. And when I was at BCG London, I did a lot of travel. So I'd be traveling 4 out of 5 days every single week. And I would go to glamorous locations like New York and Paris, but also I would go to less glamorous locations as well. But in my work, I was working with the C-suite of primarily FTSE 100 organizations. So these are the UK's 100 biggest organizations on the FTSE index, helping them navigate strategy, helping them navigate product development, market entry, and loved my time at BCG. And it was actually through BCG that I got the opportunity to join Formula One. And I joined F1 at a very interesting time for the sport. So I joined in 2017 when the sport was sold by CVC, which was the private equity company that owned F1. They sold it to another private equity company called Liberty Media. And Liberty basically brought in a new management team to transform the sport, because at the time, F1 was a bit of a languishing sport. So I joined in that capacity and I led F1's digital transformation. So every digital touch point that you've got in F1, me and my team have basically brought it to life. So this, I'm talking about Instagram, any social media platforms that you engage with on F1 was the work that my team and I have done. Website, app, if you have Netflix and you've watched Drive to Survive, we brought that to life. And being at F1 was a really interesting experience because it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. We had this languishing sport, and we were tasked with turning the sport around. And I would say that we successfully managed to do that. I think F1 at the moment is in a very exciting spot. And I was at F1 during the pandemic, which was a really interesting experience. Like the rest of the world, F1 also went dark during the pandemic, but being in digital thrust me into the center of this storm. And this caricature of me in the Formula One overalls was a caricature that one of the publications wrote about me during the pandemic because of my role in F1 and keeping the lights on. I just had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make F1 relevant during a time where everything else went dark. And it was an amazing experience. I'm very grateful for the experience. And it was through my contributions to global sport during the pandemic that I got awarded one of the Leaders Under 40 by a global organization for leaders in sports, which I was very honored to receive. And I'm currently working as a senior executive in TMT, TMT being technology, media, and telecommunications. And I'm based in London, as Dan described. I'm currently a director at BT Group, which is British Telecommunications. It is a FTSE 50 company, so it's one of the UK's 50 biggest organizations, and I lead BT's corporate strategy. I've also previously been a director at Flutter Entertainment, also another FTSE 50 organization. And I'm also a strategic advisor for a range of global organizations, including EQT. So EQT is a Swedish private equity company. They're one of the biggest in the world. They've got more than $250 billion of assets under management. I advise the LTA. The LTA is the Lawn Tennis Association. It's the governing body for tennis in the UK. I'm an advisor for them. And I also advise the Leaders Organization, which is a global organization of sports leaders. And I'm on the advisory council for Harvard Business Review, helping them navigate new topics to come out in their publications. So if you've ever read a Harvard Business Review article, I might have worked on some of the content that's come out from the publication. But away from the professional side, I also love writing, and I'm a part-time writer. I used to write for the Huffington Post, Yahoo, and even Malaysia Kini, part-time as a contributing columnist. And last year I made the decision that I would go after my dreams of becoming a writer. And I'd always said to myself that I want to become a published author, but maybe that's something I will do once I retire. Let me get my professional career out of the way and then publish my book. And last year I made the decision to be a lot more intentional with my time and say, why wait? Why wait for me to retire to publish my book? So I went after it. And From Nowhere to Somewhere is part memoir, so part my story from going from Subang Jaya to Oxford and Cambridge. But it's also a comprehensive guide on getting into Oxbridge. And I was very lucky to have received to have seen the reception that the book had. It made it to the Amazon's bestsellers list. The book was available in most Western markets in the UK and the US, but it was never available in Malaysia, which was it was a sore point for me. I think that being everywhere but not in Malaysia was it was my goal to bring it back home. And so I'm very grateful to Sunway and everyone that I've been working with to bring this project to life and bring my book back home. It is being carried by some pretty awesome bookstores. These are bookstores that I grew up visiting, buying my textbooks and my stationery from. So, I think to be able to see it on the shelves of this has been probably the most meaningful part of my entire journey. It's available in Kinokuniya, in MPH, in Gerak Budaya, and also in local independent bookstores like Timothy's Bookstore. And Timothy of Timothy's Bookshop is here today. So I'm very grateful to Timothy and to all of our partners for carrying my book. And also, of course, very, very grateful to Sunway for being able to bring this home, as I said. So that's a little bit about me, a few compilation photos to give you a bit of a flavor on my professional and personal background.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Julian. Oops, I think they'll bring us to the title slide. Wow, let's take a deep breath, everyone. In through the nose, out through the mouth, please. All right. Because yes, I mean, I don't know how you felt. That left me a little bit speechless, and I do not often say that. It's been a very inspiring journey, Julian. And if I may start, I think I'd like to structure it like this. Let's start with the dream. You were the boy, as you said earlier, who was a little bit overweight, with spectacles, a bit nerdy, and faced a lot of hardships in that sense. Bullying is a big challenge now in Malaysia. And what gave you the determination to dream big and to stay with that dream?
A lot of the lessons that I have shared in my book have become very clear in hindsight. But the seed for a lot of the thinking that ultimately led to my success were planted very early on when I was younger. And a lot of them came, honestly, through my parents. One of the things that my parents set me down when I remember I was 6, and it was a Sunday evening, a day before starting primary school. They came to me and they said, "Julian, make sure that you choose your friends wisely." And that stuck with me because that's one of the universal truths, I would say, that has led to a lot of my success. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and I found that to be very true. So, throughout high school, I constantly curated my friend circle. I was very intentional about that. And I knew that education was something that was really important because I had seen firsthand how education transformed my father's life. My father grew up very poor, but because he was able to go to the UK, he was a really difficult journey for him to get to the UK, to get an education, but it was through his UK education that he built everything that we had from there. And so seeing that happen firsthand, I think I saw the power of education, and I held on to that power, held on to that promise and that hope. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't distracted throughout school, so I would keep that dream, but at the same time make sure that I surrounded myself with people who were supportive of that dream. What that meant was my friend circles were oftentimes quite small, but they were the right people I needed to be around. And I didn't care what other people would say about me. I think a lot of the bullying came from, kids being kids. They are still finding their way. They're still finding their purpose. And oftentimes, they don't know how to express that pent-up confusion. So, for me, it was making sure that I didn't let that consume how I saw myself and just focused on the goal at hand.
Thank you. And are your parents here today by any chance?
Yes, they're seated right here in the front row.
Hello. Why don't you stand so that everybody can see the amazing parents for Dr. Julian Tan. Thank you for being here. It's the first time I've met them. Julian, you also speak of the friends and choosing friends, and I think there's one part in your book that was quite interesting where, so we talked about dreaming, now we talk a little bit about this word, the D word, discipline. And I think, many people here don't like that word. It's not cool anymore. How many of you here are from the international school? Can I see a show of hands? Our international school? Hello, let's give them a round of applause. Wonderful to have all of you here, and I hope this is as inspiring for you. And you know, in your book, you did say that sometimes you had to choose between going to a friend's birthday or studying or even spending time. What can you tell us about discipline? I mean, it seems like it's such a big sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, discipline is all about choices, and it's choices in the moment. I think the most difficult thing to do is not the thinking beforehand or the doing in the moment, it's actually the choice to do. And as you saw in my photo, you know, the first slide I had with me in red, I was a heavier kid. And I think one of the first manifestations where I saw the power of discipline was when I made the choice to lose the weight. And I was about 13 or 14 then. And I was also sick of being bullied, to be honest, being this fat kid who liked to, this fat nerd, essentially. And I said, you know, that Christmas period, I said, I'm going to lose this weight. So I'm going to do it, and this is going to be hard, and it will take discipline. And I would run every day, morning and evening, without fail, I did it for two or 3 months, nonstop. I would do 3 km in the morning, 3 km at night, and I would be very specific about what I consumed. And this was a little bit of an experiment, to be honest. When I was that young, I didn't know it was going to work. It was kind of like, okay, this is, you know, logically this makes sense. If I reduce my calorific intake and I expand more energy, I will lose weight. And at the same time, I don't know if sticking at it will work, but I tried it. It was an experiment. And when I saw the results, I think it just reinforced it. And that's the thing about discipline. The more you do it, the easier it is to build that muscle. That first step is always the most difficult. So, you know, when I'm embarking on something new, I very rarely say I'm going to do 110%. You know, if I'm going to the gym, I very rarely will say, okay, I'm going to do Monday, Tuesday, and Friday 3 times a week, because that's harder to do. You get demotivated when you don't need it. So I'll build up baby steps to get there, but I will stick to it. And I write in my book the concept of these 21 days or 21 times. When you repeat something 21 days or 21 times, it becomes a habit. And there is this rule of not skipping 2 days in a row. You know, if you skip for 1 day, it's fine, right? But if you skip for 2 days, it becomes a habit. So, you know, I think employing those things that I write in my book as well helps to build that discipline. And I found, without fail, probably unsurprising for a lot of people, that if you stick at something, no matter how, you know, how little you do every day, it builds up and you will get what you want. It's only a matter of time. It's a universal truth. It's worked in every facet of my life. And so anything that I've ever wanted, I would build a plan towards it, and I would work towards it. And I'll be very, in some ways, strict with myself about it, because I will remind myself why I'm doing it, what is the reason I'm doing it. And sometimes it does take sacrifice. It will take sacrifice. And it's choices at the end of the day.
Right, thank you. You come across as someone who's built different. I mean, if I was your friend, in Malaysians would say, "Ayah, pressure lah." You know, I mean, such a high achiever, so determined. Perhaps you can share with us a moment in your journey, you know, maybe pre-Cambridge, post-Cambridge, where you felt maybe a little bit hopeless or helpless, and what helped you overcome that?
It's a great question. I think the first thing that came to my mind when you asked me this question was I was never a straight A student, believe it or not. I was never a straight A student. When I was in primary school, I would be lucky to get the middle of my class. Number 16 was my lucky number, actually, and I would always worry coming home as number 16 out of 32. My dad would always be like, number 16 again. 1 year, I actually came in last in my class. This was in Standard 5, I think it was. And, you know, I don't believe I am built different. I think if anything, it has been over years and years of, you know, as I said, baby steps. You know, you see all of the accomplishments at the end, but you don't see where you start. I think a lot of the times it's easy to see the end result and forget the journey that you need to take in order to get there. And as you're embarking on that journey, there will be moments where you question yourself and ask, like, why am I doing all of this? It's in those hard moments that, you know, the success eventually comes, right? So, you know, that being in school and not being a straight A student, I got a lot of Bs, I got a lot of Cs in primary school. But it was the decision in standard 6 that I said, let me try and, I'm going to decide I'm going to be a good student. I want to get into a top university, and I'm going to work for it. I'm going to work for it. And like anything, I experimented. I think experiments are your best friend. If you don't know, just try, and see what happens. And don't give up after the first time, right? Just you keep experimenting and keep pivoting and iterating on your journey. And then in standard 6, I managed to get 5 A's for my UPSR, which I was like astounded. I was like, how did I manage to get 5 A's for UPSR? But thank you. But it was from that, something as small as 5 A's from UPSR. I don't see my achievement of getting 5 A's for UPSR any different to getting into Oxford or getting my first class in Oxford. It's the same mindset. And it was a decision on that day to change and to, build the life that I wanted, to go after the dreams and make my dreams a reality.
Oh, thank you. How do you build the resilience post-education to go into the rough and tumble world of the corporate world? You started off in Formula One, you were then with Flutter and BCG, Formula One, Flutter, and now, and at a relatively young age. How do you cope with that? How do you do that?
It's a great question. I think.
Thank you. I tried.
I think, again, don't care what other people think of you. Okay. A lot of the times you start to question yourself when you lean into the chatter around you. I've been in boardrooms with CEOs as part of my career, and oftentimes I'm several decades younger than the people in that room. And in moments like that, it's easy to ask, what am I doing in this room? You start to get imposter syndrome, and you start to think, in some ways actually belittle yourself. I try not to do that. I try and be in the moment. Every time, for example, I'm here sitting on the stage with you, Dan. I'm physically here, but I'm also mentally here, And I don't worry about what other people are thinking of me. I honestly couldn't care less, to be very honest. And I just focus on the value that I can create. And I found that oftentimes the first meeting is the most difficult because people size you up the moment they see you. They're like, oh, who is this young hotshot? Why is he in the boardroom? When I'm at BT and at Flutter, I've consistently been the youngest director in those organizations. So inevitably, there is always going to be people who will judge you based on your appearance. And that's just a challenge that I've had, but I also consider it a blessing because I will age gracefully. And I'll continue to look a little bit younger when I'm older. But yeah, I think just focusing on the value that you can create, you don't worry about anything else. Just deliver, build your reputation, and then your reputation will precede you.
All right, very, very interesting experiences there. When you say you don't want to care, sometimes it's hard not to care, right? I think we live in a day and age of social media, hyper news cycles, your likes on Instagram and things like that. And you're a digital guy. I mean, part of your job is getting people, for lack of a way of putting it, hooked onto, whether it's the F1 or entertainment or something of that sort. What are your thoughts then on what we see emerging with artificial intelligence and its impact on the characters or the kind of traits that we need to face these new emergences?
That's a very good question again, Dan.
Yes, 3 for 3, I think.
One of my biggest concerns about AI, and I use AI, I love AI, I think it's a fantastic tool to boost productivity and efficiency. But one of my biggest gripes and concerns about AI is that it's making us lazy. It's making us rely on the tool to the point that we don't even think anymore. I think being human is about thinking. It's about exploration. It's about growth. And with tools like AI, it makes you leapfrog all of the hard work needed to get to that output. You get a great output, you get to the same output, but you do it so easily that I think the biggest challenge is critical thinking. You know, I think it's being able to trust yourself. I think you start to question your own abilities of making decisions because you rely so heavily on these tools to make those decisions for you. So I think that for me is my biggest concern. And it's moving so quickly as well that it's very hard to say what the longer term impacts of AI will have on the human race. I do think that there needs to be guardrails around AI. You need to be using it responsibly. But boy, I think, you know, sometimes I catch myself and I'm like, you know, I'll ask ChatGPT something and I'll ask like, come on, Julian, I can answer that. Why did I have to type that into that platform? So I think for me it's that, you know, I think it's taking the humanness away from the human. And sure, your output looks great, but I'm very much a journey type of person. So, you know, journey versus destination. I think that the journey is the most important thing. You know, your outcomes and your results, for me, that's secondary. If you focus on your journey being a good one, the results will come. So I think that's, yeah, I think that would be my concern.
All right, thank you. I don't want to add too much more commentary to that because I'd also like to open the floor in a moment. So I hope everybody's got some burning questions. I'll ask one more question and then I'll open the floor to all of you. So I have got quite a number here and I'm like, which one next? But no, I think I want to ask...
It'll be a good one.
Sorry?
I'm sure it'll be a good one.
Oh, thank you. And not AI, I can assure you, most of it. I suppose the question is, did you ever see yourself standing here one day in that journey? You know, not many people can say that they've published in the same journal as Stephen Hawking and Isaac Newton. Most of these people are just almost mythical beings for most of us, and there you have it. So, yeah, did you ever see yourself getting here to this stage?
I think going back to being a destination versus a journey guy, I would say no, because I don't really think about the outcome or the result. I focus on the journey. So for me, you know, publishing my book it's been one of the most fun journeys I've ever done. It's not been easy. I think anyone who's ever published a book will know that it is a lot of work to write a book, but to find a publisher and find partners to get it off the ground is not easy. But as I said when I was doing a bit of the slideshow, being able to bring my book back home has been the most meaningful chapter, no pun intended, of this project of mine. You know, I think it was amazing when I saw my book on the bestsellers list on Amazon. That was great. But the fact that it wasn't available back home just didn't feel right to me, particularly given it contains some really useful information and tips for anyone who wants to realize their Oxford or Cambridge dreams. And also it's also bigger than that. You know, I share some of life's lessons that I feel a lot of Malaysians can benefit from.
Yeah, and what I like about this, and I wonder when many of you have noticed, is when I asked him what whether he thinks he's here, it's about what he can do for all of you, as opposed to what he's done for yourself. So let's give Julian a round of applause for that. Thank you. All right, I hope all of you are ready to ask some questions. What I will do is I'll probably take 2 or 3 at a time. Carol, how are we doing for time, by the way? Okay, great. We've got about 20 minutes to 30 minutes to go. So let's have a show of hands. Please introduce yourself, your name, where you're from, and if you could get right into the question. Everyone's intimidated. Speechless. It's okay, we'll give them a moment. It's usually like this, you know, the warm-up. All right, let's start. Gentlemen in the nice batik.
Hello. Hi, Julian. Norman here.
Hey, Norman.
Finally get to see you physically after how many years, right? It's 10 years.
No, it's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, I remember I helped to publish your first op-ed on Malaysia Kini.
Of course, that is the
Okay.
link.
And you remember the title of your op-ed, right?
I don't.
And it's still very relevant today. And it's called, Is Malaysia Turning into a New Neo-Nazism?
Yes, I remember this.
Yes. So, it's a very tough topic now. So, looking at it, right, for your, I'll just jump straight to the question. I just wouldn't like to hog on the microphone. So, you've been away for about a good decade right now. So, what's your take about, a lot of Malaysians like yourself away from the country, and some of them just eventually turn into Americans, like Ronnie Chang? So, what do you say about a lot of Malaysians coming back, after venturing a long time, but coming back to serve the country? Why is it important?
Okay, thank you, Norman. Perhaps we'll take one more right at the back. Norman is, of course, a famous journalist with Nikkei Asia. Oh, sorry. Oops, he's low profile, low profile.
Hi, I'm Go from Research Center. Yeah, so over here in Sunway University. And thanks, Dr. Julian, for sharing. And I think it's proud for us to host you over here. Yeah, and I think the question is more towards since you are in the university over here, Sunway University, then perhaps it's more towards academic kind of questions that I want to ask. So you move around the globe and you have seen so many people which train from different background. So now over here in Sunway University, is there any specific elements or any kind of the perspective that you would like the academics over here to pick up in terms of instilling into our teachings, or perhaps educational system that will be able to take care of our next generation in a better manner? That's my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Go. So I'll start with the question from Norman. Norman, it's lovely to see you. It's been a while, and it's wonderful to see you in person again. So your question was on Malaysians who are currently overseas and my views on them coming home and serving the country. I think it's a really interesting question because for any Malaysian who's left Malaysia, it is a constant tension between building your career and wanting to serve your country. I think a lot of Malaysians that I've met overseas are incredibly patriotic. And I can't speak for everyone else, but certainly in my position, I have oftentimes struggled with this dichotomy because I do want to come back, and it's always been in tension with the career opportunities that I've personally had in the UK. Prior to joining BT Group in telecommunications, I spent most of my career in media and technology. So Flat Entertainment was a technology company, Formula One is in media, and those industries aren't as developed, I guess, in the Malaysian market. But part of the reason for me switching industries to get into telecommunications is because hopefully one day I'll be able to come back. Also, with the book and with education is something that I'm very passionate about. So I'm constantly on the lookout. If Sunway is looking for any talent, they've got my number. It's an interesting dichotomy, right? I think what I will say is, and I can't speak generally for all Malaysians who are living abroad, but I can almost say with certainty, every single Malaysian I've met have always felt a certain level of guilt having left the country and wanting to come back to serve and trying to find the right opportunity to do that. So it's not for a lack of wanting. I think it's around finding, the realities, trying to marry the realities of each individual person's circumstances and the needs of the nation, I guess.
Thank you.
And then on Go's question, Go, thank you so much for your question. I think it's a great question. I've been very fortunate to have worked with well, first of all, studied with academics from Oxford and Cambridge and also some really great institutions, but also worked with really terrific leaders around the globe. If there is one thing I would say as an academic in Malaysia that students in Malaysia will really benefit from, I think there are two things. One is allowing your students and encouraging your students to lean into their curiosity. I think oftentimes, given the pressures of the academic schedules in Malaysia, there has been the decision to go for the more efficient way of just memorize this or learn this by heart and not actually question why things are the way they are. If there's one thing I've been very grateful for my own teachers growing up in Malaysia, in Subang, is that throughout high school, I was always the kid in class lifting up my hand, asking questions. I was never afraid of it. I was always asking questions, and it was very annoying to a lot of the students, I would say, and I think that's part of the reason why they didn't really like me. But I'd always question, I always ask questions. I think that's something that we don't do enough in Malaysia. I think we accept things the way they are without really understanding why, and without being able to lean into that curiosity that I think can severely inhibit growth. And then I think the other thing beyond curiosity is encouraging students to speak up. One of the biggest culture shocks I had when I moved over to the UK for the first time was trying to find my voice in a culture where, you know, where my peers from the UK, from the US, they're all not afraid to speak their mind. You know, they have an opinion and they will share it. You know, they'll make sure they will share it. And certainly as I have grown in my own career, I found that it's incredibly important to have a voice in whatever setting you're in. One of my mentors, one of the best pieces of advice that one of my dear mentors shared with me when I was starting my career, he said, when you're in a meeting room with 5 or 4 people, make sure that you say something for a proportionate amount of time. So if you're with 5 people, 1/6 of the time, you should just say something, share something. And that's something that I continue to hold on to today. And when I see Malaysian students who, by the way, are some of the brightest, most talented students, you know, when I was in Oxford and Cambridge, consistently, Malaysians, Singaporeans did very well in school. But they were, I would say, the book side, book smart, right? I think being able to have the courage to just say something, go up to someone, shake their hand, look them in the eye and introduce yourself. I think that's something that also as a culture in the East, we're a little bit more conservative. And I think it's the role of educators to build that internal confidence in your students and make them believe in themselves enough to be able to say, hey, I've got an opinion, here's what it is.
Right, thank you. So the importance of speaking up. Thank you, Julian. All right, so there's one question here. Let's continue. Dr. Yen.
Hello. Hi, Dr. Julian. Thank you for your inspiring talk. So we've got quite a number of students here from Sunway International School. And I think, well, I can't say that for everyone, but I think generally the students at our school are quite, they're quite fortunate, I think. They come from good backgrounds. So a lot of times we see that they, you know, they may not, they live a good life. So how would you, you know, so we see that sometimes the drive isn't always there because, you know, you're comfortable. So how would you advise them, you know, maybe, you know, to take the journey, maybe, is it really the destination, because they're advised that the destination is already there for them, you know? So how would you advise them to maybe take the journey a little bit more seriously or to fulfill their potential? Because, yeah, they're comfortable.
All right. How about we take this one straight away? Go ahead.
Yeah. So is it Dr. Yen? Dr. Yen, thank you for your question. I think it's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of people who may show a lack of initiative or energy, I think a lot of them don't believe in themselves yet. I think that there is a component of self-belief. Maybe it's been growing up in an environment where they're told, no, you don't need to do that, I will take care of it for you. No, you're making a mess in the kitchen, don't bother helping me out. Maybe it's, don't get anything for me, I can take care of my dinner myself. I think a lot of it actually starts perhaps in the home. And I think it's about cultivating that sense of self-worth and coupled with clarity over what is most important to the individual. And I actually, personally, I don't subscribe to the theory that people are born, or because of their environment, they are necessarily a certain way. I think that any behavior can be cultivated. It comes down again to making the decision, making those choices. But those choices need to be made by the individual. They cannot be made by your parents. They cannot be made by your friends. They cannot be made externally. It needs to be a realization that you have within yourself to say, I am more than this. I'm not there yet, but I will be. And this is the kind of life that I want. And if you're able to spark, you know, as individuals, right, if you're able to find that spark, or that purpose, honestly, you can really achieve anything you want in your life. And yes, you may be comfortable, and you know, certain things may be provided for, but I think comfort and drive, those two things can coexist. And you can grow up in a comfortable environment, but still be incredibly driven. I've seen that time and time again. But you need to have self-belief, and you need to have clarity over what you want to go after.
Does someone need a villain story or a fall before the rise?
I think it helps. I do. I think when you go through a lot of pain in various ways, it accelerates your growth. I think when you go through experiences that are really, really hard for you to contend with, that the only way is I need to find a way out. So for me, right, when I was a pudgy kid, I was like, I'm getting bullied every single day, and I just want to study. Just let me study. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to care what other people think. Like, genuinely, why? Why should I care what other people think? You know, I think there is a little bit of that. So I do think hardship is good. And in Malaysia, it's very interesting because having, you know, worked and been in other places around the world, we love comfort here. We're really comfortable here, you know? And parents tend to be quite protective of their children. You know, they don't want them to do hard things, you know. But when I see some of my friends in the UK, gosh, when they're 18, they're kicked out of the house. Like, I'm not even kidding, like, they don't, you know, my friends will have to find a place to stay, and whereas here it's a very different culture. So I think that hardship aspect is a good thing. You know, I oftentimes tell my parents, even my parents do it, you know, my parents have an instinct to protect. And I'll tell them, let us fall. It's okay to fall, you know. You fall, you scrape your knee, you get back up, and that's how you learn. And I really do believe this. And a lot of the growth that I've experienced personally has come from living alone. When I went to the UK and started to live alone, you do make mistakes, you know. You make mistakes, but you need those mistakes. And that's how you accelerate your growth. So not being afraid of doing things wrongly and having a growth mindset where you're not complacent with where you are, but you know, there's always more you can learn. You can really achieve a lot through those two things.
All right, thank you. So note to self, Dr. Julian said, ask your child to leave at 18. And parents, please create hardship for your children
A
growing
little
up.
bit is good, you know. A little bit of hardship is good.
What do you think, though? I mean, to add on to that, I also feel that sometimes when we are in a position of privilege, it's actually a responsibility. The hardship is not necessarily just ours, but the hardship of making the world a better place, right? What do you think of that? So it's like kind of like it's a hardship via sort of a dissonance.
Say that in a different way.
So what
Dan.
I mean sometimes is, sometimes, you know, if you're a person who's spiritual, you might say, God has given me this privilege, right? But he also therefore reminds me that I have a responsibility to somebody else. Do you see seeing another person's hardship and helping them overcome that as also a motivating factor?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I think there is a sense of service. When you are focused on serving other people, you live a much richer life. And you kind of have to go through this arc. Everyone has to go through this arc. I think everyone grows up thinking about the world, you're the center of the world, and that, you know, it's all about me. We all go through that, right? And it's part of that growth journey to start to realize that actually, no, your role in this life is to be a beacon of hope and service for the people around you. And when you start to adopt that kind of mindset, suddenly life becomes so much easier. You start to care less about, you know, what other people think of you. You know, you start to focus on what's important. So I do think that taking that mindset of helping other people is not just about helping them, it's also about helping you. You know, it's about helping you, because the reality is, in order to help someone else, you need to be self-sufficient. I think if you don't feel like you are full and you are whole, if you haven't reached that feeling of wholeness, then it's very difficult for you to be able to help other people. So I think focusing on yourself to build out that kind of personal fulfillment, and then be at a place in your life where you are focused on helping other people is a good thing. It's a good thing because it helps you as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Round of applause for Julian. Now, I know we've got international school students here, and I think this is also an opportunity for our students to ask some questions. So I'm wondering, okay, so there's one hand up there. No pressure, Dr. Mian is only watching you like a hawk and taking notes.
Don't do that,
I'm
Dan.
Elisha from Sunway International School.
Sorry, can you say your name again, please? Was it? If you don't mind standing as well.
I'm Elisha from Sunway International School. Thank you for your inspirational talk. I am curious about top 3 tips into getting into Oxford other than good results.
Oh, very nice. Go ahead.
Hi, Alicia. Thank you for the question. Top 3 tips beyond getting good results. So as part of the Oxford and Cambridge process, once you have put in your application, you'll be called in to do the interview. So the first stage usually is down to your personal statement, it's down to your results. But then when you're in the interview, there are a few things that the interviewer will be looking for. And I spoke about curiosity. They are going to want to test your level of curiosity, because the reality about getting into Oxford is not just about getting into Oxford or Cambridge. Once you're there, the curriculum is quite comprehensive, so they want to know that you've got the basic foundations to be able to do well in the university. And one of those qualifying criteria is, are you curious? Because if you're curious, no matter how difficult the question or problem that gets thrown to you, you will find a way to solve. So say curiosity is number 1. I would say that beyond the results, because the results are obviously a really important part of your application, you know, what you do to supplement your results to make you a kind of wholer, fuller human being is also very beneficial. Depending on who you read, where you read, or who you ask, they may say this is less important, but from my own personal experience, I've seen a lot of people who have gotten into Oxbridge, they're not just about results. I mean, if you think about this logically, Oxford and Cambridge gets thousands, hundreds of thousands of applications every year, right? So they're really getting the very best. They're getting the creme de la creme for their university. And so if you're able to go in, not just about good results, because everyone's got good results, right? You supplement, you know, what else do you do? You know, in my case, I played tennis. In my case, I did a lot of extracurricular activities, also because I enjoyed it, to be honest. I think those things also help. And I would say when you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, one of the most useful pieces of advice I've gotten is as part of the application process, if you can, either do a real world or virtual open day at the unis will help a lot because there are certain things that just don't come across from a website or certain things that just don't come across from, I don't know, from reading about it on Wikipedia. Like, if you have the opportunity, and not everyone does have the opportunity to go to the UK, but now there are virtual open days as well. I really encourage just get in there, get to know some of the students, you know, what are they like, you know, get to know the course, try and really educate yourself on what is the course that you're going to apply for, because one of the first things your interviewer will also ask you is that why are you applying for this course? And some of the people who are a bit more front-footed not only know that they want to do the course, but they also know what the first year course will cover. So they can kind of say, oh, you know, in the first year, I really enjoy this module and that module. That can really impress your interviewer. So yeah, those are probably the 3 tips.
Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Alicia. Any more questions from, okay, so we've got 2. Maybe we'll take both. Seng Choi is with the microphone.
Hi, Dr. Julian. My name is Juno from Sunway International School. I'm now in my final years of IGs, and I'll be writing my IGCSE exams very soon. My maths IGs are in less than 2 weeks. Do you have any advice to give to a student who is going to be writing their finals very soon? Thank you.
Wow. Hi, Juno. Thank you for the question.
And there's one more. Maybe we can take one more as well from the gentleman in front.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David, just a parent. Congratulations on the launch of your book. Having listened to your achievement and from where you are now, I would like to know your view or your opinion of this phrase that has been bandied around, work-life balance. And, you know, what is your advice to the young people here?
Thank you. Both very good questions. Go ahead, Julian.
Juno, thank you for the question. I think one of the most stressful things we all have to go through in life is exams. And if there's one thing I'm so grateful for now that I have gone past that, is I don't have any more exams to take. But I do remember, and sometimes I still get nightmares waking up in the middle of the night having to go for an exam that I'm not prepared for. This is a true story. But you know, my advice for exams, especially exams that are happening in 2 weeks. 3 things. 1, hopefully you would have been preparing beforehand, so early preparation. I say get enough sleep. I think this is something that we oftentimes don't prioritize on the lead up to examinations. When I was in school and when I was taking my exams, I always made sure the last 2 weeks were the most critical weeks, not because I was cramming stuff in. Actually, the last 2 weeks are the most critical weeks because I needed to make sure that everything from top to bottom was functioning the way it needed to. I needed to perform. You're basically an athlete when you're doing your exams, you know, you're a high-performing athlete. So physically, you need to make sure that you are in harmony with that, with the ability to perform mentally. So get enough sleep, get a lot of water. 2, I've always found when I was studying and preparing for an examination, I would oftentimes take what I call mini notes, so that when I'm in the lead up to an examination, I don't actually read the textbook again. You know, I have my own resource of literally, like, it's like a cheat sheet, you know, of like the most important things to remember. And these were sort of like little reminders of the most important things. So I would be able to revisit the entirety of the content without reading the content. I would have these notes at hand. So I would prioritize those notes in the lead up to the examination. And then the 3rd thing I would say is trust yourself. You know, you've been preparing for this, right? You are going to put in your everything into these exams, and just trust yourself on the day. You know what you need to know, and what you don't know, it's okay as well. You know, I have been in many situations where I've seen that doing well in exams and being a straight A student has never stopped people from being able to achieve success. Never. It's helpful, but it's not necessary. And the reason why it's not necessary is because we all have our own geniuses, you know, we will have our own talents. And once you leave education, you will find whatever that is. The most important thing is having the right mindset to be able to make the most of whatever opportunities you've got in front of you. So I think my third piece of advice is like, trust yourself, but don't be too hard on yourself, you know? Exams are not the be-all, end-all, and life is much bigger than that. And thank you. David, as to your question, and by the way, David, you're not just a parent. A parent, for me at least in my experience, has been the most important influence in my life. And my parents who are sitting in front here, they have shaped me, so it's the most important and privileged position to be a parent. To your question on work-life balance, I don't tend to look at it that way because I think work-life balance implies that work and life are two things that cannot coexist. You need to give up one in order to have the other. Someone once told me about the concept of work-life harmony. and I like that because it means that your work and your own personal life, they are singing together, you know? 1 + 1 = 3, rather than you take away one to build the other. And in order to do that, I think it's finding work that you find meaningful. It's finding, I don't really like the word purpose because it's such a loaded word, but it's sort of finding purpose in your work. And that's different from, I think there's a school of thought that you need to find your passion and be, leaning into your passion because that's what you were born to do. I personally don't subscribe to that. I think work is one aspect of your life. It's one aspect of your personality. And you are not your work. You are much more than your work. You are choosing to turn up every day to fulfill a role and add value to the people around you, and you derive joy from it. And that's how I look at my work. So, when there will be moments where work will require you to work later. When I was working in BCG, I would regularly work till 2:30 in the morning, just what's required, start my day at 7 or 8 in the morning. That's what management consultants tend to do. But I have to tell you, I never saw it as like, oh my God, I have to work till 2:30, because I actually really enjoyed my job. Like intellectually, the work that I was doing was really important work. I worked for clients to help them transform their digital platforms. And when you take a step back and actually see what is the value that you're adding, you get a lot of energy from that. And I think it's finding that joy in your work. And work is never always going to be 100%, rainbows and butterflies. There will be hard moments. That's why you're paid. But I think it's being able to find the broader purpose and joy in what you're doing to bring you energy in those moments where you have to push a little bit more.
Thank you. Work-life harmony. A round of applause. Now, I'm just mindful of time. We also have pre-university OSMED students, those who are a bit closer on the verge of thinking where to next. Do any of you have any questions? All right, just one gentleman with a question here, Sang Choi. Anyone else? We can take 2 questions on the trot.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Julian. I am Wei Heng, a student in A-level now, right at Sunway College. That's why I'm here. And I was wondering, the title of this event, Mind Over Matter, the winning mindset for future leaders. After meeting so many directors and CEOs, to you, what makes a truly good leader? Thank you.
Thank you, Wei Hong. Great question. I've been very fortunate to have been able to work with some brilliant, brilliant leaders. I worked at F1 and at Flutter with some of the best people in the business, and they have a couple of common traits. One is that they don't get bogged down in the detail. So they have a very broad vision of what needs to be achieved, and they are not hit off kilter when something small happens. They keep their eyes focused. Their lenses are wide, and they never forget that. The second thing is that they are very people-focused. They realize that their most important asset is not the systems, is not technology, it's the people. And so they have an uncanny ability to inspire the people that they work with, such that everyone that they work with wants to push to that, that next level for their boss, because they're inspirational in that way. They don't want to let them down. So I'd say the best leaders have a broad vision. They're not bogged down in the detail, and they love their people. They invest in their people, and they let their people shine. So they're also very secure in their position, that they're not like, oh, my subordinate is going to present, it's going to diminish. No, they're not like that. They're like, no, I want my team to present. They know it well. They are going to present it.
I hope that resonates because it's also about the people. Any last questions? All right, there are two questions, so let's take both, one here and one there.
Okay.
Carol, are we okay to take? Yeah, all right.
I'm Jing Heng. Hello, Dr. Julian. I want to ask a question about how much do you think luck plays a role in your success? If someone were to have the same amount of dedication or discipline, do you think they will be able to get to where you are now? I mean, how likely are they able to get to where you are now?
Thank you, and maybe we'll also take that one. Yep, and there's someone at the back, I think, who raised their hands. All right.
Hi, Dr. Julian Tan. So my name is Sandhya. I'm currently doing my second year of the IB diploma. And my question to you is, how did going to a prestigious university, how do you think it shaped you better for entering the workforce? Do you think it gave you an advantage over other people around you who could have went to like lesser known universities or like more mediocre ones? Do you think it gave you an advantage?
Great questions.
Thank you for the
Wen
question.
Hong, great question. Luck, absolutely. I think that in this life, everything that you do has to have an element of luck. I think that you do all of the preparation that you can, and then there's always going to be luck, right? But as I write in my book, I've got a chapter about luck, actually, on how working hard increases your luck. When you work hard, what is that saying? Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. There is an element of truth there. And you'll find that the luckiest people throughout history are also the most hardworking. They are able to push through the hard moments to get to those lucky moments. So they don't give up when something gets hard. They just keep going, and then you see the luck come in. So to answer your question, 100%, I would not have been able to achieve anything I've had it throughout my career without luck. And I'm acutely aware of that. But I also am aware that you are able to shape how much luck you can have. And that is within your control to a certain extent. Sandhya, thank you for the question. It's an interesting question, What I will say is that getting into a top university, I have seen that the opportunities that come from going to an Ivy League or an Oxbridge is really quite significant. And it's more inbound where, when I was at Oxford, for example, my final year, there are a lot of companies that come onto campus and try and recruit talent from the uni. So there's an aspect of being affiliated with a prestigious brand that actually increases your ability to get more more outreaches and also a second look at your CV. I think that's true. I think that when you're in an environment like Oxbridge, you are surrounded by incredibly driven and very ambitious people. And as I say, you become the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with. So when you're in the environment, there is an aspect where your growth is also accelerated, just by virtue of some of your best friends, working really hard. You see all of the things that are needed for success, you see that in play. And I think that helps your own development. There is a correlation between quality of university and level of competition. And it's more that correlation that will shape your ability to believe in yourself, to dream bigger. You're able to see people who are not afraid of dreaming big, and you then also start to dream big, and then you start to realize those big dreams. So yeah, I think there is a correlation. That's not to say that, I've never, like for example, when I was at Formula One, my boss was the chief marketing officer at F1. She didn't go to university, She doesn't have a university degree, but she's one of the most brilliant marketing minds you'll ever meet. And so I think that's also just goes to say that success comes in many different forms, and we all take our own different paths as well. But, from my own personal experience, I've seen that the power of education to be able to transport me from Subang to Oxbridge has completely changed my life. Like I said, I see my life as a life of 2 chapters, post and pre-Oxbridge, and they're completely different. They look completely different.
I hope that answered your question. All right, so I think we'll wrap up shortly. I just want to do one quick round that I call the lightning round. Are you ready, Julian?
I think so.
All right, let's start. Favorite food?
Nasi lemak.
Favorite city?
Subang. Is that a city? Is that a city? It's a city now, right? It's a city status.
All right. Favorite book?
From nowhere to somewhere.
What are very diplomatic answers. Favorite band?
Favorite?
Band, music band.
Band. Blackpink.
Oh,
Blackpink.
okay. Favorite song?
There's I don't know if you'll know it, it's Baz Luhrmann, Wear Sunscreen.
No, I've not heard of that.
By the way, this is a brilliant song. I would really recommend, if you have Spotify, to look it up. It's called Wear Sunscreen by Baz Luhrmann. It contains some of the most quintessential life advice in a beautiful song. So if you have 5 minutes, look it up.
Okay, we'll definitely look it up. Favorite leader, global leader?
Favorite Barack Obama.
Interesting, all right. Favorite weather, sunny or rain?
Or rainy, between
or
the
rainy,
two.
between
I
some.
like rainy.
All right, and the last one, Oxford or Cambridge?
Oh, come on. Whoever's winning the boat race, so Cambridge this time around.
We know who's not winning the boat race. So if I may then ask, I suppose, the last question to kind of bring all of this together, and it's just a very simple question. What's next?
What's next? I am flying back to London on Monday, going back to work on Tuesday. I've got a full-time job, but like I said, coming back to Malaysia to be able to launch my book back home is the most meaningful thing I have probably ever done, to be very honest with you. So I'll be going back with a heart full of gratitude, and hopefully, if the book does well, be able to come back more often.
Sorry, I wanted to ask it a bit more difficult. So what's next in 10 years? His answers are getting too diplomatic,
So, I am a journey person, not a destination person.
Okay.
So it's hard for me to say where I'll be in 10 years, but if there's one thing I want to be in 10 years, is I want to be completely, truly happy and at peace with my everyday life.
Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for Dr. Julian Tan. Lovely, the values, the principles, and it's about the journey. So if I may summarize that, it's about the dream, the determination, the drive, the discipline, and the enjoyment of it all. Once again, thank you very much. Join me in a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. That was really fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. On behalf of Persatuan Donald Trump Malaysia, we are disappointed that you chose Barack Obama. Well, thank you so much for that most engaging session, and thank you everyone for your presence, and most of all for your really, really good questions. Very meaningful questions, very deep questions. And thank you, Julian, for being so forthright with your answers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're still not done yet. I hope you can bear with us. We have one or two things to tick off before we end. And the most important thing is actually the launch of the book this afternoon. But before we do that, in appreciation of Julian's presence with us today, we would like to present a token of appreciation, Julian, to you. But before we do, please allow me to say something about the unique gift that you're about to receive. Now, in line with our Campus with a Conscience values, today's token of appreciation is actually purchased from an organization called GOLD. GOLD stands for Generating Opportunities for Learning Disabled, reflecting Sunway's commitment to supporting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. GOLD is a vocational training center for youths with special needs. We are motivated to create services and platforms which empower people with learning disabilities to further their independence and well-being within the community. GOLD's products, such as handmade baked goods, generate income through contractual services with local corporate entities alongside the financial support from philanthropic organizations. Now, GOLD's motto is sharing kindness is easy. I don't think you will need to do 21 days of kindness. I think if you practice kindness, I'm sure it will come easily to you. Now, to present this token of appreciation, please join me in welcoming our Group Registrar of Sunway Education, Ms. Ng Beng Lian. Ladies and gentlemen, the token of appreciation is actually baked cookies from Gold and a tiffin carrier. I've been made to understand that the cookies are really delicious. Julian, you may need to do 6 hours of running today and tomorrow to work off the calories. And can we ask Ms. Beng Lian to remain on stage? Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to move on to the launch of the book, From Nowhere to Somewhere. We have some quick housekeeping to do. Just bear with us. We're going to magically, you will not see it, remove the tables and the chairs. Just pretend that you do not see the magic that happens. Please give them a round of applause. For that effortless act of removing the table and the chairs and the drink. Now, that's the cover of the book. And what's going to happen is we're going to have Julian and some other invited guests to sign the cover of the book. So let's get started. May I invite Professor Cheng Mien Wee, the Executive Director of Sunway International School and Director of the Pre-University Studies, and also Ms. Carol Wong, Head of Sunway University Press. And Daniel too, please join us. Yeah, can I get Miss? Yeah, all right, perfect. Julian, we'll need you to append your signature first. Just sign anywhere. And then Ms. Ng Beng Lian. Prof Cheng, maybe. Carol. This is the only place on campus where graffiti is allowed. And lastly, Danial Rahman, please. Thank you. Let's have a group photograph. Thank you. Can I invite our group registrar, Professor Cheng Men Wee, Carol, and Daniel to exit the stage. And Julian, please remain on stage. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, just a quick announcement as well. The book is retailed at $54.90. During the launch, we are giving a special rate of $49.90 as an incentive. And Julian has kindly agreed to sign the copies purchased. Now, before we proceed to the book signing, one last thing that is required of us, well, actually not the last thing, the second last thing, is to invite Dr. Julian Tan to say a few words before we take a group photograph. So I would request that we remain in your places. Julian would say a few words and then we'll take a group photograph.
So, 20 years ago, I had just completed my high school, not far from here, in SS15. I was a young, naive, and awkward boy with a big dream. I had the dream of getting into a top university because I believed that a good education was the golden ticket to transform my life. And so I put all of my eggs into that basket. I worked hard, I leaned into my curiosity, I built unrelenting discipline, and I delayed any instant gratification so that I could invest in myself and in my future. 2 decades later, I can tell you that that bet paid off many times over. Through the power of education, I was transported from the quiet and sleepy suburbs of Subang Jaya to the hallowed halls of Oxford University and then Cambridge. These were credentials that opened up doors. It opened up the door to my dynamic career in London, where I've had the privilege of leading some of the world's most iconic organizations, including Formula One and BT, British Telecoms. Sometimes during quiet moments of the day, I would reflect and I would feel utterly bewildered at how this once wide-eyed nerd who used to get picked on at school would go from studying physics in the dusty, graffiti-laced classrooms of Malaysia with occasional power cuts to studying physics in the very same spaces once occupied by great minds like Sir Isaac Newton and Stephen Hawking. It's a wild thought, but also not that crazy a thought when you've got the right mindset. A winning mindset. This is a mindset to challenge the seemingly impossible, to embrace uncertainty, and to break through barriers. That's the essence of what I share in my book, From Nowhere to Somewhere. From Nowhere to Somewhere is my story, and yes, it is a comprehensive guide to get into Oxford and Cambridge universities. So it is directly relevant to any college student who want to realize their Oxbridge dreams. But it's also much more than that. I share life's most important lessons to help you achieve your goals and create the life of your dreams. These are lessons like choosing your friends wisely, because you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's lessons like dreaming big, such that if your dreams don't scare you, they aren't big enough. And lessons like giving zero attention to what other people may think of you by accepting that doing anything extraordinary means ruffling feathers and inviting criticism. I talk about the importance of staying curious, humble, and hungry. These are universal truths about the keys to success in this complex thing that we call life. It's a book about grit, about growth, and about gratitude. Grit to push through the hard moments, to pave the way for growth. Growth as a way of living, to drive success. And gratitude. Gratitude for all the good that growth will bring. The joy, the meaning, and the life worth living. Because that's what transformed me from a small-town dreamer in Subang Jaya into a scholar at Oxford and Cambridge. It's all part of the winning mindset to transform your life. So I hope you will grab a copy for yourself or for someone that you love and want to see succeed. And I would be honored to sign your copy if you would like me to. Remember, anything you've ever desired in your life is possible with the right mindset. Adopt a winning mindset and you'll change your life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julian. All right, ladies